Welcome, Bloomington Normal, to the Ryan Mack Show. I am your host, Ryan Mack, and I am live in studio for the first time on my own show. Normally, I pre-record because I am also preoccupied with another job during the week. But I'm live today. Across the way, Kevin's going to help me keep this thing on the rails, unlike East Palestine. Ooh, too soon. 309-451-9299 is the show line. You can text in, you can call in, Facebook, Twitter at the Ryan Mack Show. I'm all over the place, wherever you get your podcasts as well. So when I was growing up, I don't know about you, but I didn't know anything about government, how it works, what it was comprised of, until maybe about the age junior high when I started having some U.S. history courses. I actually enjoyed it because it became to me one of my favorite classes. I also remember being in that exact moment in that class on 9/11. And we all know what 9/11 was. The first thing I remember that my teacher excused himself for a phone call. Now, normally teachers have their phones on silent unless it's an emergency. But he excused himself. His wife called him and explained what happened. Now, we were unaware completely of what was taking place. He comes back out of the small office he was in. He paused. He took a breath and then explains the World Trade Center towers have just been hit. Now, I'm thinking to myself, okay, a plane rides into a building. That happens every once in a while, I would think, as an accident. But he paused again and then tried to carry on with the rest of the class. It wasn't until second hour that I began to realize what had happened was actually more serious than initially thought. The second hour, I was watching it live on TV, and I still had no idea what was taking place. These giant commercial jet just flew into some really tall building in New York City. The World Trade Center, I had no idea what the building was. And then, as I was watching it, another plane, as if it was on replay, hits the second tower. Now, 13, 14, I still have no idea what was going on. Later on, we had an assembly. Teachers, principals, staff was talking to us, and at that point, I still was clueless. And everybody was crying. They were panicking. They were freaking out. Later on, about the same hour and a half, more planes were taken out of the sky. One was on the way to the White House, in fact. Another low-flying plane or object took out the Pentagon. What happened that day eventually happened again, but not on a tragic scale. As I grew up and learned more about 9/11 and some of the things that took place, I thought to myself, surely 9/11 wasn't an inside job, right? It can't be. This was a terrorist attack against a country that was free on the world stage. They didn't want us to be free. They stood against everything we stood for. They hijacked some planes and threw it into a prominent tower in New York, devastating our country for years to come. The way the plane hit the Pentagon, I've seen videos, I've seen conspiracy theory type videos. There's no way a commercial jetliner flies that low and hits the Pentagon. And by the way, if you've seen the videos, if you're old enough to see it live, or if you saw it just by Googling it, the way the towers collapsed, it doesn't look like it just toppled over from a plane fire. They were set to implode almost simultaneously. But what does all mean now? Surely it's not an inside job. Well, let's fast forward. Another incident that happened last September during the conflict in Ukraine, we've been spending billions and billions of dollars on an invasion, and some very prominent U.S. figures have financial interests in Ukraine. Energy companies think Joe Biden and Hunter. This is in no way saying that I am in support of Russia at all. I think Putin is a maniac. He is on the lines of a dictator that should be held accountable for the invasion. I don't think anybody should be invading sovereign countries. But I don't excuse countries for holding threats and then later on taking out an energy source. So to the blue heart liberals that always listen to my show and troll, I'm going to repeat it again. I am not a Putin sympathizer at all, just so I'm clear. When you think of the Great Reset, Ukraine, World Economic Forum, and the ties, did the U.S. government get involved with another event that shapes the world history currently? I'd like to know that. So, if you remember back in, I think, 2019, I'm not sure the time frame, President Trump then warns Germany about opening up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline that was coming from Russia to Germany and most of Europe as a natural gas source and a funding source for Russia. He lambasts them, and I have a clip, and here he is warning Germany on that situation. Maybe. Oh, technical. So anyway, you've heard the speech, and he goes on this rant blaming Germany. How could you be so stupid as to get most of your energy to... There it is. Not playing yet? Okay. All right. Anyway, live radio has its awesome ties. Germany goes on to go ahead and sign off on this pipeline being finished and get most of their energy from this pipeline. But he was right. He was right based on the things that have happened since. Because what has happened is that oil and natural gas have gone through the roof. Russia invades Ukraine. And around September of last year, this pipeline sustained damage to line 1 and 2. It's a natural gas pipeline running from Russia, completing this pipeline. It wasn't in completion until Biden took office. So he removed the sanctions of one of his many executive orders and the first things he did in Biden's first few months in office. He removes the sanctions and allows the project to become finished and back online. So, what does that all mean? Well, we were right. Germany is now under an energy shortage because of those pipelines. Now here, on February 7th, which is odd, 2022, this is Biden talking about what would happen if Russia were to actually invade Ukraine. This is his plan for what would happen. Let's see if this gets to play. Yeah. All right. They're both on MP3. I wonder what's causing the issue. All right. Yep. No, that's fine. So on February 7th, Biden is on record saying to a reporter that if Russia goes ahead with their plans to invade, that Biden is going to end the pipeline. He's going to put an end to it. Now, I don't know about you, but if you or I said X would happen if Y happened, and then Y actually happened, that the reaction would be. So think of it this way. If I said I'm going to rob a bank today if I run out of money, but don't get around to it, and later on the local bank gets robbed, and I've said this publicly, who do you think is going to ask the first questions? Who do you think is going to be interrogated first? The person they actually find later on, or the person that publicly said, you know what, I'm going to rob a bank today? Joe Biden is out there on video, on tape, saying that he will put it into the pipeline. And then months later, it actually happens. So immediately after these explosions happen, Biden administration, media, Ukraine, they all blame who? Russia. They all blame Russia for that. And it's amazing because we still haven't had a formal investigation into what exactly happened. Now, I know Dan Bongino has talked about this on his show a couple times this week and even weeks earlier, that we still don't know who was at fault, U.S. or Russia. But an investigative journalist by the name of Seymour Hersh, you can find his article, he illustrates how, in fact, the United States took out the Nord Stream pipeline. New York Times calls it a mystery, but the United States executed a covert sea operation that is kept secret until now. So like most journalists who are actual journalists, they do the undercover work and they don't care about their partisan politics. Seymour has a very good article illustrating how, in fact, U.S. was involved and not Russia. The U.S. Navy's diving team and salvage center can be found in a location as it's obscure as its name, down what was a country lane in rural Panama City, now booming resort. 70 miles off the south of Alabama border, the center's complex is a nondescript as its location. It's a concrete post-World War II structure that looks like a vocational high school on the west side of Chicago. So he goes on, and this goes on a little bit describing the building that they're in and the technical capabilities this group undergoes. So last June, Navy divers operating under the cover of a widely publicized midsummer NATO exercise known as Ball Tops 2 planted remotely triggered devices that 3 months later destroyed 3 of the 4 Nord Stream pipelines, according to a source with direct knowledge of the operational planning. Now, seems to me like that's partly the problem. Secret, covert ops. That way nobody can find out what's really happened. He goes on. 2 of the pipelines, which were known collectively as Nord Stream 1, had been providing Germany and much of Western Europe with cheap Russian natural gas for more than a decade. The second pair of pipelines, called Nord Stream 2, had been built but were not yet operational. Now, Russian troops amassing at the Ukrainian border during the more than bloodiest day of the war so far since 1945 and getting ready to invade Ukraine. He saw the pipelines as a vehicle for Putin to weaponize natural gas for his political and territorial ambitions. Remember back when Trump warned Germany not to open these pipelines because it would be bad and Russia would gain tremendously from these? Well, Biden's trying to take credit for being more tough on this and say we can't have these pipelines operational because Putin will use them. Kind of seems like Trump was right all along and we just erased his name from getting credit. So, Biden, when asked for comment, a White House spokesperson said in an email, "This is false, a complete fiction. The U.S. wasn't involved. Well, for much of that time, the issue was not whether to do with the mission, but how to get it done with no overt clue as to who was responsible." There was a vital bureaucratic reason for relying on the graduates on the center's hardcore diving school in Panama City. They were Navy only and not members of America's Special Operations Command. Seymour goes on to explain whose covert operations must be reported to Congress and briefed in advance of the Senate and House leadership, the so-called Gang of Eight. So they find a workaround using the Navy and not a covert Special Operations Command who has oversight. The Biden administration was doing everything possible to avoid leaks as the planning took place late in 2021 and into the first months of 2022. Biden and his foreign policy team, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Secretary of State Blinken, and Victoria Nuland, whose name keeps popping up, and other issues as well, the Undersecretary of State for Policy, have been vocal and consistent with their hostility toward the two pipelines, which ran side by side for about 750 miles into the Baltic Sea from two different parts in northeastern Russia, near the Estonian border. So this is close to the Danish islands and just before ending in Germany. So, direct route, which bypasses any need to transit Ukraine, has been a boon for the German economy. It enjoyed abundance of cheap Russian natural gas. This is according to Seymour, how they were able to manipulate it to where it looked like an accident and underground operation. If you think about that for a minute, if what Seymour is explaining how the rationale for doing so, it makes perfect sense. The U.S. doesn't want this known outwardly that we took out a pipeline. So they had to come up with a very meticulous plan in which to make it look like an accident or that nobody would find out. But there are real journalists out there, and there are people who actually want to find these answers. And we still have to get to the bottom of these answers. And until we do so, we're going to keep asking questions. But for now, stay tuned because I got more information on this. You're listening to the Ryan Mack Show on Cities 92.9. Welcome back to the Ryan Mack Show on Cities 92.9. Text in what we're talking about today, the Nord Stream pipeline situation. 309-451-9299 is the text line. So I've been burning through this article by Seymour Hersh. He has a plan in place that creates a possible plan overtly that the U.S. was involved directly in blowing up a pipeline. Now, if you don't think that's a little weird, I guess that I'm the only one. Why on earth the U.S. would blow up a pipeline underground so they can avoid public scrutiny and then try to blame the other side? We've been notoriously on top of that lately. So to continue on, I was reading a little bit from the article that Seymour Hersh put out. Again, this is his article. You can find it. He's a pretty renowned journalist, investigative journalist. But he exposes a plot in which the U.S. is directly involved and not Russia. So, from the earliest days, we know that Nord Stream 1 was seen by Washington and its anti-Russian NATO partners as a threat to Western dominance. The holding company behind it, Nord Stream AG, was incorporated in Switzerland in 2005 with Gazprom Partnership, a publicly traded Russian company known to be in the thrall of Putin. Gazprom controlled 51% of the company, with 4 European energy firms and 1 in France, 1 in Netherlands, and 2 in Germany, sharing remaining 49% of stock, having the right to control downstream sales by inexpensive natural gas to local distributors in Germany and Western Europe. The profits were shared with the Russian government, and the state gas and oil revenues were estimated in some years to amount to as much as 45% of Russia's annual income or budget. So it's just weird when you have all these companies that are tied to Russian investment with this pipeline. Yeah, understandably, we should be concerned about that. But why would we be concerned with our own demolition of these pipelines more so than Russia? Because if Russia has a very large percent of their budget and their interest in these pipelines, why would they sabotage their own financial gain? It's just kind of weird. America's political fears, he goes on, are real. Putin would now have an additional and much-needed major source of income. Germany and the rest of Europe would become addicted to low-cost natural gas supplied by Russia. Trump was right all along. We could easily help our allies in Europe in a much friendlier way and also keep it cheap. But what did our fine president and commander-in-chief do as soon as he became president? He cut off our energy-producing capabilities, and he sold our supply to China. He allowed Putin to build these and finish these pipelines, and now he controls most of Europe's energy and not us. When the enemy controls your energy, you are at the feet of the enemy. Does that make sense? It seems like the West and Europe didn't really take heed to Trump's warning. So this diminished European reliance on America. In fact, that's exactly what happened. He goes on to say, many Germans saw Nord Stream 1 as part of the deliverance of former Chancellor Brandt's famed Ostpolitik theory. I'm not sure if I said that correctly, but I'm not German, so there we go. Which would enable post-war Germany to rehabilitate itself and other European nations destroyed in World War II by, among other initiatives, cheap Russia gas to fuel a prosperous Western Europe market and trading economy. It's weird that we continue to sit here today and we still don't have any answers. It's weird that we continue to blame Russia for most of the problems we actually caused ourselves. And I don't know still to this day whether we had a hand, but I'm betting if we did, there should be far-reaching consequences as well. So that's not the end of it. I got plenty more to discover. Hang tight. This is Cities 92.9. You're listening to the Ryan Mack Show, and we will be right back. Welcome back to the Ryan Mack Show on Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal. Text in, call in, 309-451-9299. 309-451-9299 is the number. We've been talking about the Nord Stream pipeline and the issues surrounding who blew it up and who should be held accountable. Now, I've been first going through an article by Seymour Hersh explaining in his own ways, in his own terms, and his investigative research on the exact plan that the U.S. would do in order to blow up the pipeline itself. Now, remember, Trump warns Germany, okay? He warned them just about the end of his presidency.
Germany will become totally dependent on Russian energy if it does not immediately change course. Here in the Western Hemisphere, we are committed to maintaining our independence from the encroachment of expansionist foreign powers. It has been the formal policy of our country since President Monroe.
Well, he was right. So fast forward, and Germany says they laughed at it. They said, no, we'll be fine. We'll use this pipeline. Ukraine won't get invaded. Russia's fine. We'll get some oil from them because, we don't want to deal with your administration. Which I think this was before re-election was a possibility. So they were looking at maybe if he gets reelected, we still don't want to deal with him because he's hostile. So maybe that's the thing. But again, here's Joe Biden announcing on February 7th, I believe, of 2020, what would happen.
That means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly? Since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control.
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
Oh, so he promises that he is going to end it, even though he has no control over it whatsoever. You notice that he doesn't say, well, we'll work around and try to figure out how to end this. Rather than just keeping the sanctions on Russia for not building and exploring the pipeline further, he decides to, in the backdoor way, if they invade, we'll put an end to it. And the reporter's kind of like, that's not how this works. What do you? She actually asked a legit question. What? You can't do that. What are you saying, Joe? Yeah, we don't know what he's saying, but we've come to find out, according to Seymour Hersh and his idea and research, Joe Biden found a way to make the pipeline go away. Did he bomb it? There's been no definitive answers. Did Russia bomb it, sabotaging their own financial gains in order to further escalate the war? Those are answers we need to know. And are we going to ever get them? That's up to the journalists in the room who actually legit ask questions and want to find out these answers. Are there going to be any investigative matters into this? We still have to know. So text in, call in, let me know your thoughts. If you remember 9/11 and have some weird feelings about how that turned out, and you take a look at the pipeline explosion and the more that comes out about who actually was involved, do you think that it was possible that the U.S. government, again, wasn't involved under an underground attack to further their interest of ending this pipeline? Never mind Russia's involvement. They invaded the country. They had no business invading. They built a pipeline, finished it, almost control 40% of Europeans' natural gas and oil output, and further funding their war, despite the sanctions that we slapped on them. Let me know your thoughts. 309-451-9299. This is the Ryan Mac Show if you're just tuning in. We've been talking about the Nord Stream pipeline. It was bombed late last year, and we've been discussing so far who could possibly be at fault. Did Russia sabotage their own pipeline after building it and trying to get it operational? Or was the U.S. again involved in something they had no business sabotaging? We'll get to that. So Seymour goes on, talks about the planning aspect of it. He talks, I mean, this is like a huge article. I'm not going to go in and read the rest of it, but you can find it if you just Google, the fancy Google machine, and find his article. Dan Bongino, I know, has talked about it. It's an interesting look. Now, he doesn't say this is deliberately what happened, but this is his specific take on the events that how the U.S. could have taken it out. So, right after the explosion, when we blamed Russia, we said there's no way U.S. is involved. You did this to your own pipeline. Ha, ha, ha. We even have Secretary Blinken talking about it to reporters. And he discusses that this is an opportunity? Nah, it can't be an opportunity. It's a tremendous opportunity, he says, and I think I have the clip. He discusses
this is also
another
a tremendous
context.
opportunity. It's a tremendous opportunity to, once and for all, remove the dependence on Russian energy, and thus to take away from Vladimir Putin the weaponization of energy as a means of advancing his imperial designs. That's very significant, and that offers tremendous strategic opportunity for the years to come. But meanwhile, we're determined to do everything we possibly can to make sure that the consequences of all of this are not borne by citizens in our countries, or for that matter, around the world.
Interesting. If you paid attention to the last part of it, he was making sure he ended the conversation with, oh, well, we're going to make sure that this doesn't have any backlash on our own citizens and other of our allies. But this is a tremendous opportunity. He goes on to state that, yeah, we didn't want this pipeline to be operational, even though it was, and so we had to blow it up. Now, he doesn't explicitly come out and say this, but holy Moses, Batman, can you think of anything more dumb to say than Biden coming out and saying, yeah, if this war starts, we're going to go ahead and end this pipeline. And then you have his own Secretary of State saying, yeah, it's tragic that this pipeline blew up. Boy, we sure don't know who was involved, but it's a tremendous opportunity to remove Russia from having power over Europe. Awfully weird. Man. So a country who is not at war tells Russia if they invade that we'll end the pipeline. Now, we didn't tell Russia explicitly, but we said in a statement, yeah, we're gonna promise that we're gonna end this. And then months after the invasion, the weirdest thing happened. A pipeline explodes underwater, sending natural gas everywhere in the ocean. It's almost like we told them something would happen, and then it happened. But nobody's taking blame. Russia's blaming us, and we're sitting there with our thumb up our butts and blaming Russia. We don't know how this happened. Our leaders are out there saying it's Russia's fault, but backhandedly saying this is a great opportunity to not have Russia get involved with any more financial furthering of the war. So, again, as I stated earlier, who benefits from this pipeline? Is it Russia, who used the pipeline to build initially for their furthering of the funding of their war and economic activity and giving energy to Europe? Well, yeah, they benefit from having the pipeline online, but who benefits from this Russian pipeline going to Europe? I wonder if there's a company. Oh man, I can't think of it. There's a company in Ukraine that deals with, I think, natural gas. Oh, and he was on the board. Yeah, Hunter Biden would benefit from this Russian pipeline exploding, because that means Russia would no longer be the catalyst for European energy, and Ukraine would be at the forefront again. It's just really weird how these all started to play out. We didn't take out the pipeline, Russia did. But now that it's out, again, Hunter benefits from circumstantial tragedies. It's amazing how that happens. Oh yeah, and the big guy, Joe Biden, earns his political fluff with this as well. So it's just really amazing how all these pieces start adding up to maybe we did do it underground, like Seymour says. It would make for some crazy headlines if in fact we did do it and took down the pipeline. So here's another story. I got this from, guess what, the Washington Post. Not exactly a right-leaning story, article. But they also have come out and said that there's no conclusive evidence that Russia was in fact involved. Weird. So they've done some investigative research like Seymour has, but he's putting some of this little spin on it. This article in the Washington Post, world leaders were quick to blame Moscow for explosions that were among the undersea natural gas pipelines, but some Western officials now doubt the Kremlin was responsible. So you even have Western officials who don't like Putin getting involved now doubting the fact that he was actually involved. So this goes on. It explains after the explosions were severely damaged, they quickly blamed Moscow for a dangerous act of sabotage. With winter approaching, they thought, well, this was caused by Putin because he intended to strangle the flow of energy to millions across the continent in an act of blackmail and designed to threaten countries with withdrawing their financial and military support for Ukraine. But now they've investigated, and numerous officials have privately come out and said Russia may not be to blame after all. Quote, there's no evidence at this point that Russia was behind the sabotage, said one European official, echoing the assessment of 23 diplomatic and intelligence officials in 9 countries interviewed in recent weeks. What does that tell you? If you have even the most staunchest of opponents to Putin and Russia's plan to invade and somehow sabotage its own pipeline, you have them even coming out and say, hey, wait a minute, we've actually done some of the research and suggest that Russia wasn't involved. So who looks more like the ones coming out on top? Who looks more like the ones involved for the real explosion? Was it Russia? Was the United States getting involved behind the scenes? They went so far as to say they didn't think Russia was responsible. And others still consider Russia a prime suspect. So they're going back and forth. So if you're just tuning in, this is the Ryan Mac Show. I am live in studio today talking about a whole range of issues with this Nord Stream pipeline and who is involved. Don't be afraid to text the show. Call in 309-451-9299 is the line. Let me know if you've got some insight on this conversation we're having. Who's at fault? Did the United States, like 9/11, get involved, take out a pipeline in order to take out Russia's need for advancing financial security? Or did Russia do their own doing and take out the pipeline? It's just really weird how we still don't have answers. And you think that this would be a major event that took place. But it's frustrating because we have so many things going on in our country and our leaders have been absent. If Russia did it, Why isn't there any major investigation outside of the European officials? Why aren't we doing any more investigative powers? If the United States in it, there should be heads rolling if this was an act of sabotage. We have no business telling dictators around the world, hey, knock your crap off, but we're doing dirty deeds underground and getting away with it. We're supposed to be above that as the United States. Now, I know we've got some corruption going on in our very own country, but throughout the test of time, we have been the one that has propped up everybody else in the world. So how can we be the number one world's police when we're going underneath the ground and blowing up pipelines just for the heck of it? It doesn't really make any sense. But like I said, where are our leaders at? Absent. Nowhere to be found. It doesn't make sense for Russia. It doesn't make sense for the United States. It doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. Could they have possibly done it to explain and blame the United States and to further escalate the war? We already have an escalation point. As we get more and more involved in this war without sending troops on the ground, we're dancing around World War III. We're right on the edge. If China gets involved, then we're going to have a real mess in our hands because they're already thinking about what Russia did in their invasion to think about what can be done differently with their incoming maybe invasion of Taiwan. That's the strategies that's been working around. We have to get some answers. And our leaders are stuck in Delaware and cackling around. Hey, stay tuned. Right here, the Ryan Mack Show on Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Ryan Mack Show on Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington, Nord Stream 1 and 2. And who's really at fault? You know, it's amazing that two world powers can't figure out who did what. They just keep pointing fingers. And we still have no answer to this day. With Seymour Hersh, earlier I explained, has his article on how the U.S. was involved. Russia could also be involved as well. But I laid out a couple of articles today explaining the fact that wasn't really Russia. So I want to get to the real reason why our leaders are absent. And it's discouraging because we've got a lot of things happening here in our own country, and our leaders are nowhere to be found. They're in Delaware, they're on a beach, or they take midnight trips in a surprise to Ukraine, and they set up under fake sirens as if nothing was happening at all, an emergency level. And back home, our number two in charge has been on all kinds of trips, talking again about her obsession and her love for Venn diagrams. Here's a compilation of her just great obsession.
Like Venn diagrams. Okay, so if you look, I do. You remember Venn diagrams, those three circles? Right. And then let's just see where they overlap. I love Venn diagrams. Okay. I love Venn diagrams. I just love Venn diagrams. You know, the three circles, right? Sometimes there are more. I love Venn diagrams. You know, the three circles. I really do. I love Venn diagrams. You know, the three circles, sometimes there are more. He sees the Venn diagram of it all. He sees that there are those circles, and maybe people seem that they're a little different. They live in different parts of the country. They may be different age or different race. But that area in the middle, that overlap, I happen to love Venn diagrams. Yes, you know, those three circles. I have constructed a Venn diagram on this. Remember those three circles, how they overlap? I love Venn diagrams. I just throw it into a Venn diagram. I'll tell you everything you need to know about any issue, especially where there is, you know, you're trying to understand the intersection and the connections, right? So I brought props. I just have two, so bear with me. Venn diagram. Let me hold it. Wow. When you look at a diagram of just a Venn diagram in that regard, it tells a real tale. Here's my Venn diagram.
Oh, we have a Venn diagram. Props. I love it. I love it.
I brought props. Well, let me just say, I love Venn diagrams. I really love Venn diagrams. You know, the circles, right?
Oh my lord. I couldn't really tell through that clip if she really loved them or not, but she cackles every time she says it. So she must really like Venn diagrams. You know, the thing about Venn diagrams, they're really cool. Oh my lord. So instead of worried about what we have going on in our own backyard and the conflicts that we're about to undertake around the world, we've got two leaders who are totally inept, no idea where one of them is, except on the beach most of his time, and the other one's cackling her obsessions over yellow school buses and Venn diagrams and the passage of time. That's where we're at. It's amazing that we have gotten where we are with these two in charge and their whole cabinet of weirdos. Instead of getting qualified individuals who know what they're doing and know how to run a country, we're stuck with these band of idiots that have absolutely no idea what is going on. And they're laughing about it. They're laughing in your face. That's how much they don't care. If you think that they actually care about the individual, you're dead wrong. It's, in these trying times, we have inflation, food shortages, energy prices through the roof, a possible World War III with Russia, China. Are we going to be able to fend this off? Are we going to be able to survive as a republic? Can we defend ourselves? No idea. No idea. But we have to start taking a chance, not just voting. Get out there. Start doing your research on figuring out why you shouldn't trust the United States federal government to the level of which most of you do. Because every time that we sink our trust into them, they turn around and explode a pipeline on a national stage and then blame everybody else for what they did. It's amazing we have the leadership we do. I hope after all this today, you empower yourself to do more of your own research. Don't trust everything I said. I've looked up some of the, I don't know if we did it or not. But do your own research, stay tuned, and stay into everything that's going on. Hey, I'll catch you next week. This is the Ryan Mack Show on Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal.